The circle is now complete with Ty West's trilogy capper, Maxxxine. Let's discuss. So I just saw Maxxxine, and off the top, I'm going to tell you, this is a good movie. So before I really get into the review, if you've seen X and Pearl, I recommend you watch Maxxxine. Do you need to watch Pearl or X before you go into Maxxxine? I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's required. You'll hear a lot out there this week about, or you may have already heard this, that you don't have to watch Pearl, but you should watch X before you watch Maxxxine. I'm actually in a different camp. I actually don't think you need to watch either of the movies to watch Maxxxine, to enjoy Maxxxine. You can. I think it's cool if you do, because they're darn good movies. But and they enrich the experience probably for you. But I don't know that it's necessary to enjoy Maxxxine. I think going into Maxxxine, you should go in. Not that you shouldn't do this. I'm not saying you should. It's a suggestion. So I suggest what could be fun going into Maxxxine. I almost wished I hadn't seen Pearl and X for this reason. And it is, if you imagine yourself sitting at home on a lazy Sunday, you're flipping through the TV and you find a movie on TV. It looks like it's a movie from the 80s, and you don't know what it is, but you're intrigued, and so you watch. Maxxxine feels like this type of movie, and I liken it to the experience of being home on a lazy day, on watching cable. You find an 80s movie, just flipping through channels, and it looks interesting, and you watch what's going on. This is without any context, and I think if you looked at Maxxxine like that, you might still enjoy it. This speaks to how good the movie is. Again, that's a suggestion. You don't have to go into the movie like that, but you might find something interesting about it if you watched it with that mindset, and then it might invite the idea of watching X and then Pearl if you want to do that. So what the heck is up with Maxxxine? What is this movie about? Oh my gosh. First of all, in case you don't know, this movie is about Maxxxine Minx. She's our lead character, one of our primary characters from the previous movie, X. Maxxxine takes place about 6 years after the events of X. Maxxxine is a star. She is a star in the adult entertainment world, and she's at this point now where she's trying to break into mainstream success. She wants to be a bigger star, like a big star. So that's her goal. That's what she's after. Right as she's on the cusp of superstardom, and her past threatens to destroy everything she's worked for. So someone is after her and threatening to destroy her career before it really gets going in the way she wants. And so that's the premise. We've got, in the backdrop, a series of murders is happening in the Hollywood area. First, they're in the periphery, and they start getting closer to the people in her circle, which heightens the tension. And Maxxine's got to figure out a way to sort that situation out so that it does not impact what's in front of her, which is superstardom. That's what we got going on. One of the things I love so much about this movie is how much it feels like it came from the 1980s. And I don't mean that in the way that you might see most period pieces today make a movie set in the 1980s. And it feels like that just because of the clothing or a lot of the needle drops, the music choices. I'm not talking about that. This film, I think probably, and I think the same is true for X and Pearl. I mentioned this particularly in my Pearl review. I want to rewatch X just so I can to get the feel of this. But I think this is true for X too. But for sure, Maxxxine and Pearl, The other way it feels like it's of the time that it's representing is the music. I'm not talking about the soundtrack. I'm talking about the score. There's a lot of synths. There's a lot of things that like stingers and things for when things happen, like when things are revealed or whatever. There's certain things that happen only in you watch any mystery movie, any action movie from the 1980s, and listen to what the music is doing. This movie, like Ty West and his team really did their homework when it comes to that element of it too. Like they did it with all of the movie, but the one of the things you may not always think about when you watch a movie is the score. You may, because you're paying attention to the story in front of you, so you may not pay attention to what the music's doing all the time. But if you happen to be one of those people, you will notice that the musical score is it's I think it's probably one of the last things to make this movie feel like they took a modern day camera and somehow went back in time and shot this movie in the 1980s and then brought it back to 2024 and delivered this movie to us. The only thing, I mean, you don't think about it as much, but the only thing that makes it still feel sharp or whatever is the camera, because obviously it's a movie that was shot in 2024. So what we see is decidedly sharper than what we would get from a camera in the 1980s. As an aside, I sometimes wish that they would make a movie with an old camera, film camera from the 1980s. Shoot a movie right now with that camera, and give us that, because there's something to that look too that's pretty cool still. I'm all for digital and stuff like that, but even present day film is tight. But also, it isn't like those cameras broke, right? Aren't they're around somewhere? Couldn't you just take one of those cameras and make a movie with those cameras? I don't know. Whatever. Another thought for another video. But yeah, this movie is straight up 1980s situation, and not overly so. It just feels like something you're watching something that is and that doesn't feel cotton candy 1980s, not surface level. Moving deeper from the music, from the score, you obviously have the soundtrack, whatever, which is solid, which is excellent. Particularly near the end when they start dropping other songs from the time period, which is fantastic. The overall production design and the darkness of it. This is like a darker film from that time period, and nowhere does the illusion break. It feels like you flipped the channel and that shows 80s movies or whatever it is, and this movie is on and you're watching this movie. That's exactly what it feels like. The hair, costumes, the period cars, items in the background, the set design for certain rooms. It's pretty perfect. It's perfect. And I think the production design team should be recognized in some way, because they really did a lot of work to make it. Even like the video stores, like the VHS, the video stores. It's just yeah, it was cool to see that and have it not, and it didn't feel, it didn't feel too modern, like too now. I liked that. It felt very much centered, rooted in that time. So that's another excellent thing about the movie. The story, this is a different story, obviously, than the previous two movies. This movie is about, it's essentially, it's a murder mystery with elements though of the slasher element is still up in there. This is still sort of has some, it's a thriller, horror type of stuff, because someone's still like in X, where Maxxine and her people were being picked off. This movie is similar in that way. There is someone still after her. We don't know who it is, but there is something about it that feels like, this is like Freddy Krueger. This is like, Halloween. Someone is after the main homegirl who we're following. And so if you're into that, you will enjoy this. You might be disappointed because it doesn't feel like X or Pearl for that matter. I think one thing going in that people might be disappointed by the fact that this movie is called Maxxxine, and there's not a lot. Maxxxine as a character, she just moves very differently than Pearl did. When you have a movie called Pearl and how much of that was such a character study and really getting to see and understand her inner workings, Maxxxine doesn't really delve as deeply into the character of Maxxxine as Pearl does into the character of Pearl. But I think that's okay, because ultimately this is still a story of Maxxine's journey, what her goal is and what she's trying to get to. And the question becomes whether or not she gets that. Does she get to her goal? I think people might be disappointed because they might think it's like something that came before it, and it's not that. This is more a mystery with Maxxxine at the center, trying to make sure she can still do what she's trying to do and not get caught up in the mystery surrounding her. One of the things that's really cool about the movies as a whole, where you look at Pearl as a story about Pearl and what she's doing, what her journey is, and then Maxxxine is a story about Maxxxine and her journey and what she's dealing with in that. And X, if you look at X, is where the 2 points where they intersect. There's something really cool about the visual of an X and how Maxxxine and Pearl are 2 lines that make the X, right? And at the middle of that point right there is where the 2 of them meet. And that story is something. Which one of them is going to win? Is age and wisdom going to win, or youth and vivaciousness? Is that going to win? If you've seen X, you know what time it is. You know what happens. But the interesting thing about that is that Maxxxine continues to move forward, and oddly, the essence, Pearl, is still with her. It's weird, but, and this is because Maxxxine survived this ordeal, and I think there's something to be said about that. Maxxxine is a character as a survivor. Because she's a survivor, you almost feel like, as the viewer, whatever she's doing in Hollywood, and however rough and tumble 1980s Hollywood was, which it was probably much more in a different way than it is now. You have a lot of the grit and grimy sex, drugs, and rock and roll. A lot of the stuff that's happening in the 1980s was a period of excess. It was a lot of stuff. And Maxxxine, having been through a harrowing ordeal 6 years prior, Hollywood stuff almost feels like it's child's play in a way. Like it's nothing compared to what she can get through, the hoops that producers and stuff want her to jump through to achieve ultimate superstardom, whatever it is. And there's something interesting about that and that part of her character. She's definitely much more, she's subdued in a way that she wasn't in the previous two films, or at least in X. But I think she has something that she's trying to protect, so she has to be a little bit reserved. And I think that's cool because you get to see this other side of her. And speaking of that, I move to the acting. Mia Goth, she is, I don't know what there is to say about Mia Goth that hasn't already been said. She's a revelation. I hadn't seen her in anything other than, I think, Infinity Pool, the review for which is on his channel. But I know she's been doing some other stuff. She's been out there in the mix. Before the X trilogy, she was doing stuff. But these movies really are a great showcase for her abilities. And she has tremendous range. And this movie also shows that. She's fantastic. And you really get to see her play a lot of different shades, and that it's really cool to see. Next to Mia Goth, you have a really good cast. You have this cast is ridiculous. You have Kevin Bacon, who is obviously, who is endlessly cool. He's fantastic in this movie. What I love about Kevin Bacon in this movie, he's so delightfully, deliciously, like devious, and there's a charm to him though, and uh, he's having a good time. You can tell he's just having so much fun. I think next to me, Goth, watch this movie for Kevin Bacon. I think he easily is the scene stealer in this movie. He's the next, like which makes a little bit of sense to me because he's the next most prominent character outside of Maxxine, I think, that features in this movie. He's great. He feels like a dark Jake Gittes. He's a private investigator. Jake Gittes, if you don't know, obviously is the main dude in Chinatown, Jack Nicholson's character. I like that this movie takes place obviously in the heart, the belly of the belly of Hollywood, and Chinatown obviously is an LA story. This is an LA story, and he's Jake Gittes without any scruples, and it's kind of cool to see Maxxine go up against a character like that. This guy who's quintessentially, and who's not ashamed about it. Kevin Bacon does a fantastic job. He's excellent, and Giancarlo Esposito is great. Who plays Maxine's agent? I think he's fantastic. He's got a smaller role than Kevin Bacon, but he makes it count, and that's endlessly cool. Elizabeth Debicki is fantastic. I love her character. She's a film director who is making a sequel to a horror B movie, and her angle is, I think, if you're a film head, you'll appreciate her character and what she's about, what she's trying to do. And her character actually also represents, I think, another person. All of these three films have something, a character like this, which is to say that there is a character who feels like, to me, acts as this vessel through which film lovers can appreciate the art of film and the heights that the artists can reach to with through the medium. Elizabeth Debicki plays a director who's trying to do something. She's coming off of a B movie hit, and she's trying to do something better. She's trying to make a B movie into an elevated product. She's got lofty aspirations, lofty goals, and I think X, they're trying to do something similar. They're making a porn movie, but they're trying to elevate the medium. They're going to do something better than just a regular run-of-the-mill porn film. And in Pearl, you have the projectionist who is thinking about trying to get into this new medium of what was early porn, stack films, earlier type of pornographic material. He lives in a movie theater, for Pete's sake. This guy, he's around movies all day. And there's something about what all these three films have to say about cinema, the love of cinema, just on its own, but also the dream that cinema instills in viewers. That's endlessly cool to me. I think also the other thing, talking about porn films, and these three movies also they chart a narrative of the adult film industry in a way. If you look at it, like in the 1910s, where the late 1890s and early 1900s, where pornographic visuals were just becoming something that people could access. Like, that's the beginning. And then when you get to the late 1970s in X, around that time, there were a lot more of those films being made, and you could go to theaters and watch those things at the time. And then when you get to the 1980s, it's full blown. This is like, you could see how there is a level of development when it comes to the adult film industry in the 1980s, and how in this movie, in Maxxine, there are people who know who Maxxine is from her work as an adult film star, and who could go see her doing peep shows. There were all these other avenues where you could be known. It's still kind of underground, but not really, because it's people know who you are, and so it's interesting the what these films show in terms of the history of cinema, and then also these little moments in the history of adult cinema, adult film, adult entertainment, or whatever, which is pretty cool. I think there's a paper there somewhere. But look, all in all, this movie is great. I think it's a solid end to three movies that are, again, a great showcase for Mia Goth as an actor. They are also very well written. I think the writing is very strong, and I think they're well plotted. There's a lot of there's just a lot of good stuff to be found in this movie. I think if you're a fan of the first two movies, you may like this one, but I think if you separate it from the series and watch it as someone who appreciates films, you'd appreciate this movie. I would hope you did. I did. But yeah, let me know what you think. Maxxxine gets top marks for me. I think I highly recommend it. And just as a film person, I think definitely check it out. It's worth the watch. So that's going to do it for this review. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Come on back. We got some more reviews on the way, because we've seen a lot of movies this week and there's a lot to talk about. Thank you. And I'll see you back here in the next one. Take it easy.